on the people. But it gives very little. And it continues to violate, the most vulnerable, and even the middle and professional class and small businesses have been ravaged. Yeah. So yes, we need to deal with the historical issues. We need to deal with the new crimes, the state captures, the corruptions, political leaders who become rich just because they get into office. So we need to deal with that. But I'll also just say on a positive note, we are very encouraged by the regulations, the recent directive of the SRC on members of parliament who will no longer be able to draw. I think there's been a cap on their sitting allowances and their other forms of allowances. Yes. They are being told, yes, and then also we had the ruling on CDF. Yeah. So through the court system and through the courage and proper functioning of the commissions, we are beginning to contain the political excesses of our leaders and to begin to deal with that. So we need more of that. And yes, it's not easy, but it's something we must do.
Yeah, and that is the ideal and that is what we hope for. But for now, we have to deal with, first of all, getting to that point. So I want to take us back a little bit to IEBC and, what is happening now. I mean, I think a lot of what's happening with respect to the results and how those are being transmitted and indeed announced are significantly different from 2017. In 2017, we had the nice big board at the Bomas of Kenya. There were numbers that were coming in. Actual numbers. Now, all we've got is the number of Forms 34A that have been received. What's your sense with what IEBC, particularly the chair, has to do now in terms of also managing the expectations of Kenyans? Everyone is able to, can do their own tallying if they want to. But, we're all just waiting with bated breath. So I want us to just sort of focus on that for a moment and see what Wafula Chebukati should do. Of course, all eyes on him and the entire commission. They have 7 days to announce the result, but, obviously...
Should they take all the 7
days? Should they take all the 7 days is the question.
Yeah. I think one of the things that IEBC has not done very well, of course, it came as a late thought, based on a lot of advocacy and a push for IEBC to communicate, is public engagement. Initially, IEBC was extremely closed. Nobody probably would have known what's happening within IEBC until now, a month and a half ago, when people, institutions, organizations demanded that IEBC honestly has to inform the public. So what the chair has to do and the commissioners is to enhance its public information. Keep speaking to people, keep talking to people, keep briefing Kenyans about these processes. And even as much as they had these, information that was helping Kenyans understand the voter system and all that, the public service announcements and all that, the same now needs to be enhanced at such a time as this. Of course, we are seeing different institutions, stakeholders, even County Governance Watch, where I serve and work, will be issuing a statement around the observations that we picked up from our 92 observers that the commission accredited. But the last word in the election by constitution rests with the national returning officer, the chair of the IEBC. So they have to think of a way in which they are going to help Kenyans to contain their expectations, because in this election we are going to have more than 14,129 losers. Yeah. These are people who have supporters. They are people who are seated on the screens and waiting to also listen to their results. They can mobilize for good or also mobilize for bad. What is the messaging that IEBC has put in place to ensure that there is enhancement on people staying calm and that peace is also being sustained? Of course, we've also seen the religious leaders issuing a statement, but we have always seen them. What then does that mean to people who are so expectant, woke up so early yesterday to go and vote? By the time we were voting, we had no idea about the voter turnout. We have people who are disenfranchised by, of course, the failure of the KIM system. And IEBC, if you begin to count the number of missteps, the number of mistakes that they walked into this election with, I think they might not even feel this, they will overflow from this station. So the commission has to, secondly, enhance its confidence in the citizens so that people begin to see that, yes, they were able to pick up. They began from a very slow move. They had a lot of challenges. They had a lot of issues. But towards the tail end of the process, they are picking up and they are able to help Kenyans understand the process. What is Form 34A? Those are things that Kenyans need to be taken through. What is Form 34D, the certificate given to the president-elect? What do those forms mean? Because the conversation now is about forms and forms and forms. Who picks which form and takes it to who? That results management pathway is one opportunity for IEBC now to engage much more closely with the citizens. Of course, Kenyans have a lot of questions. There has to be a portal where people can be able to post those questions and get answers from IEBC, which I believe that the Commission's department and the Commission's manager at IEBC needs to pick up, you know. Yes, we have the verification mechanism by IEBC, but candidates want to get results. They want to verify what their agents or what their political parties are for them. There has to be a mechanism by the Commission put in place to ensure that those difficult questions that citizens have out there are answered. And that way, Trevor and of course, Yvonne, I believe it will help in terms of pacifying the kind of expectations, because that's what ultimately, the long wait is what ultimately a number of times boils into tension, and then suddenly the country is happening. Yeah.
Wanjiru, what must IEBC do now to build on the confidence of the public? Because I can see even on their portal now they're at 96%. The two counties, Kericho, Elgeyo Marakwet, have now reported 100% already of the 34As. What must they do now to build on the confidence?
I totally agree with what Kevin is saying. And if you, IEBC, in my view, appears to have preoccupied itself with the mistakes of 2017 and has really put in effort into the technical aspects, looking at the technology, looking at, you know, they've got, if you look at their voter education tools, they laid out how the transmission will happen, how the tallying will happen. They've published their disputes guidelines. Of course, their code of conduct was also published, but there was a court ruling that suspended parts of it. So they've also had setbacks in terms of operationalizing the framework as they see it. So they've been very proactive technically. But I agree fully with Kevin that in terms of PR, in terms of messaging, they've been very poor. Even if you listen to their press statements yesterday, you know, I think there was one at 6 o'clock where the commissioner was, you know, even the tone and the language, the fielding, you know, you can have the choir, you know, but the way you communicate, don't sound defensive. You know, don't say it's obvious. You know, these are things that we know. Because, you know,
not
that
everybody
means...
knows.
No, and even if you've said it 2-3 times, people are anxious, you have to say it again. So one is basic PR. They seem to have missed that. Then the other thing is, and you know, the IEBC, there is apparently a political party liaison committee where the IEBC meets with political parties. And we've seen them on occasion in the media. We imagine they meet regularly. They should be meeting right now. They should be meeting to ask questions about what happened in Mombasa. Do we feel there's a problem? And fielding those from inside. And also with Kakamega, Kibwezi, and other places, and voters who are unable to cast their ballot, because those ones could really throw the whole thing into a spin. My sister-in-law, for instance, was not able to vote because she couldn't find her fingerprint on the KIMS kit, and the presiding officer wouldn't allow any other form of verification. So I imagine there may be more like those. So I think the IEBC may be trying to insulate itself from political interference, which I imagine can be very overbearing. But by the same token, they should be talking to these political actors, because they are the ones who can make one wrong statement that will set the country aflame, because this is our period. This is actually the watch period.
Right.
We never have problems voting. I mean, we voted worse, the queues have been longer, there have been skirmishes. This was tidy and very high-tech. Actually, it was lower middle income class voting. But now is when we go back to our real character, and IEBC has to be alive to that. So how do we get them?
And you're right. This is really it. You know, the transmission and the declaration and the announcements that are made, because it is at this point that people would start to get a little anxious and sometimes, jump to conclusions and make assumptions about, what's really happening, particularly with the numbers. And like you said about the issue regarding political interference, remember that was a big deal in 2017 with, lots of talk about interference from both sides of the political divide within the commission. But what is also interesting, I think, particularly when you take a look at, Kakamega with what happened. So Kakamega and Mombasa both had their gubernatorial races pushed forward. But Kakamega was also particularly peculiar. So not only were there the issues with the mix-up with the printing of, papers for the governor's race, but then there was also numerous challenges of voter identification to the extent that one presidential candidate literally cast his vote at 1 p.m.
Manually.
Manually,
not being
right.
able to do it through the
There you go.
Yeah.
I wonder what this means for the residents of that county. How many of them stayed and waited to come back when that announcement was finally made that they would allow for the use of the manual register? How many of them went and came back? And, to what extent were they disenfranchised, if at all, with respect to their right to vote? Kevin?
Definitely. In fact, that aspect of disenfranchisement is quite huge. And it doesn't just rest with the voters. It also goes all the way to the candidate who has spent resources, you have spent monies, you have been spending sleepless nights to excite your people to go and vote for, and then suddenly it doesn't happen. Kakamega County has over 580,223 registered voters.
Yep.
And we're looking forward to seeing out of the results that are going to come from the commission, how many, or rather what percentage of voters therefore voted against the total number of registered voters. That number, Yvonne, is not small. It is such a huge number that is able to tilt any results of not just a gubernatorial position or election, but even the presidential. And of course, taking note of the fact that the two counties, Kakamega and Mombasa, are the counties of the deputy party leaders of the party that sponsored the Azimio presidential candidate into the coalition called Azimio La Umoja One Kenya Alliance. The question then that probably the voters are also asking is, would there be something behind Mheshimiwa Oparanya's people being disenfranchised and Mheshimiwa Joho's people also facing those kind of challenges? Which is why the IEBC needs to be very categorical in terms of how it's communicating to these voters, pacifying them, encouraging them that on August 23rd you'll have an opportunity to come and cast your vote. But there are also lots of preparedness concerns because how do you identify a voter who already voted and their fingers were already inked, and those who are going to come in and vote for the governor? I think IEBC needs to be very critical and categorical in terms of how it is communicating to the citizens, and particularly from those 9 other areas, because we have, from our observations, we have Mombasa County, Kakamega County, Kacheliba constituency, Pokot South, Rongai in Nakuru, Utawala Ward, South Game Ward, Oloismani Ward, and also Thana Ward. These are people who are anxious. They are anxiously waiting. Fact of the matter, and from history, in terms of how by-elections are done in Kenya, I project quite a low voter turnout. Remember that the government gave us a national holiday to go and vote.
Yeah.
Is there going to be a holiday just for the people of Mombasa and for the people of Kakamega and these other areas? What does that mean to the national outlook? Trevor, you know that where we come from, people travel all the way from Los Angeles, fly in to go and vote. And then you show up in Kakamega and you're not given the opportunity to vote. You've booked your own air ticket, which your governor candidate did not book for you. What does that mean to the logistical aspects of the voters? So it's quite unfortunate, Yvonne, because right from IEBC's 2017 lessons, they've been able to learn a few lessons, but I think in terms of their logistical preparedness and just the fact that there are this number of failures, I think does not encourage a number of people and might lead to quite a low turnout for even the various 9 areas where we'll be having by-elections.
That's right. Wanjiru just looked at you like she couldn't relate. I mean, Los Angeles to... I mean, if Wanjiru were to vote traditionally from where her ancestors were, it's probably a 30-minute...
It's a 30-minute drive. So I'm trying to compute that. But, in an election that's been really quite seamlessly managed, it's unfortunate that these major blunders have happened in strongholds. Azimio strongholds when an election is this close. And this is why this should be an issue. So it's concerning when, if there's an, you know, the IEBC has an intention to announce a result based on the number of, you know, all the 34 A's coming in when this issue is outstanding. Because if there was a suppression of the vote on account of these bungled messages, then you need to consider the factors that Kevin is talking about, because those could make the difference between difference in the presidential call, and that could tip this process into a place we don't want it to go.
I want us to take a look at the numbers for a moment. Trevor, what do we have from the IEBC?
So from the IEBC, they're at 97.07%. That is 44,874 polling stations reporting out of 46,229. Quite a number of them have already reported this in 100%. That's a turnout rate so far. What you're seeing on your screen is the numbers as we crunch our figures at 1,823,990. That is 49.79% of votes for the ones we've tallied for William Ruto, UDA's presidential candidate. For Raila Odinga, Azimio is 1,788 and 125. 48.80% of the votes cast so far. I think we're safer off dealing with the percentages because the numbers keep changing really fast. And out of the polling stations, so let's keep this simple because the numbers are quite a lot, okay? So there are 46,229 polling stations in total in the country. Out of that, from 34 A's that IEBC has received, is 44,874. There are counties, however, that have reported 100% of the Form 34 A's. One of them is Kericho, 924 polling stations. All of them have submitted their forms. Elgeyo Marakwet, 555 polling stations. All of them have submitted their forms, so they're 100%. Nandi has 3 more to go. Uasin Gishu is at 99.99%, meaning they only have 1 polling station to go. Nyeri, the same thing, 964 polling stations out of 965 have already submitted their Form 34 A's, which is another 99.99%. So essentially, it's safe to say IEBC already has the numbers at this particular point.
Yes, they should. I also just want to update you on the numbers that we have. So what Trevor has read out to you, which is what you're seeing on your screens, is based on the Royal Media Services tally. And we can now tell you that out of the 46,229 Forms 34A, we have managed to put together 11,858 polling stations. That's about 25% of the national tally. Actually, it's 34%, 34.3% of that national tally. So, you know, the numbers are steadily moving. I think that means we've counted another 1,000,
yeah,
I believe.
It means we still have 34,371.
Right, yeah. Actually, we've got 34,000 to go.
Yeah.
But what we have counted so far is 25% of the total Forms 34A from across 46,229 polling stations. So we continue with the count.
Exactly. We keep the numbers coming through to you. As soon as we have them, you will know them. But Wanjiru, we're talking about the IEBC. Are we seeing somehow a disjointed administration right from the top? When the judiciary makes pronouncements that has an impact on elections that is happening the next day, and then IEBC also comes out and says that only 200 KIMs out of the 46,229 failed, meaning what the court had mentioned, had they not had a manual register, what were they supposed to do? Is there a cavalier kind of approach and a disjointed administration right from the top where the left hand doesn't know what the right hand is doing and doesn't care how it would impact the whole outcome?
Yeah, well, the interesting thing with that is that IEBC pulled out of the multi-stakeholder consultative forum, which was supposed to bring, you know, to align these kind of questions at maybe, you'd say, maybe administrative level. And the IEBC pulled out, saying that that forum was encroaching on its mandate, some of its mandates. And so, of course, there is no discussion. And then, coupled with that, you have a very short period during which a lot of decisions were shooting hard and fast. And this period was short because you also recall that the IEBC was not properly constituted until a year ago. We then have had amendments to the Elections Act in January. And so from that point on, we've been on a very tight implementation program. Without dialogue and without common thinking, of course, these things are going to happen. We've also had, kind of some inattentions within the IEBC itself. The IEBC is a body, of course, that, their 2021 report by the Auditor General gives them a qualified opinion. On grounds, I think they have some maybe 16 grounds of imprudent use of resources, failure to account, and things like that. So the internal management of IEBC, the internal politics, is also a consideration. They've been able to give us administratively and logistically a good election, but internally, if they are not pulling on the same page internally, then it could fall apart at this point. There are interests, of course, around the election. If those rear their head at this point, it could fall apart. Where do we stand now, and what could and should happen is it is our hope that the leadership will have consultations with the political parties. Even in 2017, part of the problem was the failure to dialogue. Yeah. And eventually I think that was acknowledged, but by then it was too late and things had kind of really gone south. So they need to learn and do that earlier. What then needs to happen is that hopefully once this is successfully behind us, we need to audit the IEBC. We need to audit it in terms of its performance. We need to audit it in terms of its financial accountability. We need to look at the way the IEBC works and is constituted. But I will make a final point on why the IEBC continues to struggle. We have an administration, the Jubilee administration of Uhuru Kenyatta and William Ruto, that has continued to undermine institutions. So the independence of our institutions has been under attack, whether it's the judiciary, whether it's the EACC, all these independent bodies have suffered from interference by the administration, because this administration has sought to put under its thumb all points of oversight and independent kind of checks and balances. So the IEBC is a consequence of the failure of the administration. They are working under very, very difficult circumstances, but they have to be alive to the politics, and they need to get somebody to help them with their PR. Yeah. We should be having scheduled press releases. Those press releases should be giving us substantive information, not telling us what we already know, what's already reported in the media. So they should be talking to those who were disenfranchised, because if you went and tried to vote and didn't vote, you are disenfranchised. And you have a basis under court to then petition the whole process. So you might have maybe some 10 people who might hold up a whole national process on constitutional grounds. That shouldn't happen. So they should be addressing those real issues as opposed to sweeping them under the carpet. And I think they have been downplaying the failure of the KIMS kits. I think they quite quickly came up with a number, and you'd have expected a more holistic statement. They would have been giving us a number, they would have been giving us the locations, they'd have been giving us, tell us the polling stations, tell us what remedies, categorize them. But when you just quickly sweep and say, well, it's a small 0.4% of
out of 46,000.
Yes, they gave, is it 0.04% something? How did you know?
Yeah.
Is that the only information? Is that the only feedback? Was somebody just telling you? Is that the only feedback you got? So the IEBC needs to be accountable to the people of Kenya, and that will stop this situation from building up, tension from building up. I think the last thing is the expectation. The IEBC commissioners were on record on TV saying, the results will be known, provisional results will be known very quickly.
Yeah.
Of course, every hour that the count goes on, switching up back and forth, tension builds up.
Yeah.
So they need to ensure their communication is clear and that they do not make an announcement without the concurrence of the political parties and resolving those issues that may be outstanding.
Yeah. Kevin, is the IEBC the weakest link here? Is it just designed to fail right from the top? Because even when we talk about budgetary allocations, there was delays with that as well. And the expectations now is that they execute their mandate within a limited time frame, and yet the resources weren't allocated. Are they the weakest link, or is this just an entire system that needs to be overhauled and relooked at?
Trevor, this, in my view, is an entire system that needs a complete overhaul and relooking. Because the history of the electoral management body, the EMB of Kenya, whether it is ECK from 1997 to IIEC to IEBC, the trajectory has not been quite encouraging. And probably it's because of the manner in which our institutions are designed, either to be successful and progressive or to fail and just be moribund. So I wouldn't very quickly link it to budgetary issues, because IEBC itself, even beyond the Treasury's involvement, has had internal concerns from commissioners resigning at the heart of an election. Kenyans are waiting for results, and a commissioner is at the airport, my life is in danger, crying from wherever, without necessarily looking at the details, the concerns. You have a director of ICT being murdered in broad daylight, or, you know, at the wee hours of 4 days to an election, and nothing absolutely happens. Kenyans are told that we are sorry, we met Musando, we got Musando's body, and many years on, who killed Musando? Those are concerns that Kenyans look at and they're like, really? Like, seriously? Elections? Elections are bungled, and Kenyans go into an election twice in a year, and the same person, where the buck actually stopped, is still managing another election in a few days or a few months or a few years. So, Trevor, these are concerns that, in my view, also help me to look at the spirit of the Kenyan. What are the opportunities and avenues to hold the IEBC commissioners, both the administrative aspects and the management aspects, from the chair's perspective and the CEO's perspective? How can Kenyans ask them, why are you not using our monies correctly? Because elections are run on taxpayers' monies. Their salaries, the cars, the fueling, the papers, everything within the commission is taxpayers' money. Does it ever bother us as a people that we are seated waiting for results that we probably are not so sure about, even the mechanisms around which those results are being tallied and are being disseminated to the public? So that question would rather go back again to the citizens, so that we begin to ask ourselves, can we petition the IEBC? And if we are to petition the IEBC, what would be the role of political parties, who actually play a very fundamental and critical role in terms of determining even who becomes the commissioners of the IEBC, including Parliament? Can we have a mechanism as citizens and voters, the 22 million of us, having conversations with our representatives, you know, to petition IEBC on our behalf? Summon the chair of IEBC and his commissioners, and then ask very critical, fundamental questions around election results management, the preparedness of IEBC. Why would we make it so difficult for Kenyans to vote and then bring in voter education just a month to the election? Of course, one good thing that IEBC did was that in 2017, the voter educators were deployed up to the constituency level, and it was only one person. But for 2022, we have 2 people deployed up to the ward level. But why start it so late, despite the financial questions? You know, it's really a system of the electoral cycle, and IEBC is aware about this, that when one election ends, you do an audit, and then you start preparations for the next election. Why do we wait until it is so late, Yvonne?
Yeah, and as we continue that conversation, I just want us to pause for a moment, because we've got, you know, an update for our viewers before we go and take a look at what's happening. So this just in, the National Assembly Majority Leader, an outgoing Kipipiri Member of Parliament, Amos Kimunya, has conceded defeat I want to read part of that statement that he said. He says, we wish to thank the people of Kipipiri for the opportunity of serving them for 15 years. He says it's a responsibility that his family and team has carried out with honor. He says, we appreciate that life is dynamic, shaped by constantly emerging and often surprising circumstances. We did our best for Kipipiri. We are proud of our achievements, and that history will never be erased. The people have, however, made their choice, and we respect that. We wish them well. May God bless Kenya and Kipipiri. So just once again, the National Assembly Majority Leader, an outgoing, Kipipiri member of Parliament, Amos Kimunya, has conceded defeat. Someone else who has conceded defeat today is current Langata member of National Assembly, Nixon Korir, who's conceded defeat following an unsuccessful re-election bid for the seat of Langata. So now we wait for the final declaration. Of course, you remember, that for the seat of Langata, amongst many others, there was Felix Odiwuor, also known as Galango to many. But he is one of many, so we'll wait for the final declaration. But just so that you know, those two members of National Assembly have conceded defeat.
You can get a lot of these updates on www.citizen.digital, where we have first-hand information coming through there. And we can also see that Nakuru Town East Member of Parliament, David Gikari, has been freed on 50,000 shillings cash bail. He's set to appear in court on August 17th after arrest for causing chaos at a polling station yesterday. We also know that the school's reopening date has been pushed to Monday, August 15th. From tomorrow, as the process of tallying of ballots still ongoing. That's according to the Education CS Magoha.
Yeah, and another update, you remember the incident around a shooting associated with Kimilili MP Didmas Barasa. He had been given 24 hours to surrender by the Bungoma County Commissioner Samuel Kimiti. He is still yet to do so.
He's yet to surrender. Yeah,
he's yet to surrender, and no doubt they're still looking for him. So we'll update you on all of these things that are happening around the election. And that's just what's important as well regarding the local races, right? So, we focus on the presidential, which is great. And, that's the vote that is counted first. But really, like we've said here, I think politics is local. What do you think were some of the choices that went into that? We've seen several constituencies like Tetu, amongst others. I'm told Butula constituency as well, where, no MP has managed to be re-elected. And those are some of the things when you take a look at even, what happens with the turnover rate or the attrition rate in the National Assembly. How important is that? And Wanjiru, do you think we pay enough attention as voters to those local races as well?
Right. I think, of course, it's very important because, like you say, all politics is local. And now we've got quite a few options at the local level. I think Kipipiri might also fall into that category of high turnover, where they try one, don't like, keep going, and that's the democracy. The beauty of democracy, you can keep doing that. But we also have with the member, a particular interest, because I think that, one, we are seeing our democracy maturing, in my view. You've seen around the campaigns more issue-based campaigns. We've also seen, to my mind, the voter apathy is voters really saying, this is my protest because you're not speaking to me. So that's the discerning voter who can go to the campaign, take the money, and then come back and still say, well, I still don't feel you until this system works for me. With regard to the local races, I feel that ever since 2013, the local races have diffused the tension and interest in the national. And had we had a proper implementation of devolution, it would be even more so. And part of the insecurity of the presidency and such is becoming irrelevant. Because where you have effective devolution, people don't bother that much with the national government. So, yes, I think the local matters. I have seen, we've seen around, especially in Nairobi, and I imagine even in other parts of the country, citizens getting together, especially the Residents Association, and interrogating their political leaders. We've had, of course, platforms by civil society and others scrutinizing who is your candidate. We've had a lot more interest. Before, I think people would get to the polling station and wonder because the fixation was with the president. But now people are asking questions. So our democracy is slowly and surely maturing. How do we deal with the issue of attrition? I think that has to do with accountability of our political leaders. And I think we need to really take a step back. I'll talk from civil society perspective. We really need to rework our tools. Our methods have not been as effective under an administration that was really violently opposed to the Constitution. We don't know what administration will come in and what their attitude will be, but as much as political parties have lost the youth and a part of the ground, civil society has also lost. And civil society is important because our role is to ensure we are a countervailing force to power. Media being part of that, structured civil society being part of that. So we really need to go back to the drawing board because we are losing the citizens. The citizens are not feeling us. The youth are not feeling us. But one of the big, maybe the last point I'll make is the ability to influence outcomes. We need resources to go to the local level. We need resources to respond to citizens. Yeah. We need opportunities to be available. We need to deal with this black box of non-implementation, where promises don't get implemented. So I think this is a point for reflection across the board for our political actors, but for us as well. How do we unlock those parts of our democratic process that are locked? And they're locked because of patronage. Maybe last point is on the IEBC. As Kevin was talking about the ECK, the IEC, IEBC, there's one common trajectory around procurement violations, procurement mismanagement. People getting into this office and getting compromised because they are able to abuse the law around procurement, around allowances, and then get compromised. State capture is, really perpetrated in this way, where you have commissioners, public officers, abusing public office, and the executive kind of allows it because when it comes to the crunch, then these people are pliable and malleable. So we must hold the IEBC to account on the procurement violations, on the failure to give a clean audit, because until we hold public and state officers accountable for their actions while they're in office, then the rest is really just, it's an illusion, it's an imagination, it's an aspiration that we might not be able to achieve.
Okay. Kevin, I'll come to you in just a bit, but let's take a pulse of what's going on across the country. And Safin is here. Safin, where are we heading to next?